A woman secretly meets a male servant while her husband is away, but she is suddenly awakened by the sound of approaching hooves. She immediately looks out the window and happens to see her husband returning without a sound. The terrified woman quickly puts on her nightgown, while also waking the sleeping servant beside her. In a panic, she hurriedly hides him inside the wardrobe, then pretends nothing has happened and sits on the bed to wait. Right after that, her husband walks in and asks with a trace of suspicion why his wife is still awake at night, but the woman covers everything with clever lies, until her husband picks up a belt from the floor, exposing his wife's secret. Born from a lowly background, Katherine is sold to a noble family as a bride. She is full of longing and hope for the husband she has never met. Desperate to find the light of love in him, inexperienced Katherine, with the help of her maid, changes into a white nightgown and waits anxiously for her husband's return, but she never expects his cold attitude to tear apart her dream. Faced with her husband's tone that allows no refusal,
Your nightdress, take it off.
Katherine can only slowly take off her nightgown, but she never expects him to simply put out the light and lie in bed alone, leaving her standing there foolishly, bitterly disappointed. Just like that, Katherine becomes like a little bird that has lost its wings, no longer able to fly freely. Even the maid serving by her side treats her with icy indifference, allowing others to manipulate her without mercy. She is like a motionless vase, placed in the position that belongs to her every single day. When morning quietly arrives, the maid walks into her room, like the ghostly sound of a bell. She wakes Katherine from sleep. Then she tightly binds Katherine's body and dresses her in a proper blue gown. Katherine is like a flower waiting to be admired, sitting quietly on the sofa in the drawing room. In early 19th century England, women have to obey countless rules of aristocratic etiquette. At dinner, the men discuss the mysteries of business, while she can only sit silently at the table and wait. Time seems to freeze once again. Katherine rises wearily and helplessly, saying goodbye to her husband, but he looks toward his father first, and only after receiving permission does he allow her to leave the dining room. She is like a pet kept by an aristocratic family, controlled by others at every turn. But just as Katherine steps outside, her strict and harsh father-in-law calls her back. He orders her to stay awake until her husband returns, and demands that the servants keep watch over her. But after a long day of exhaustion, Katherine is already drowsy and barely awake.
Stop staring, Anna.
Just as the two finish speaking, her husband walks in. He angrily drives the servant away. After drinking, her husband treats her the same as always, making Katherine take off her nightgown and face the wall. But the sounds coming from her husband make her feel confused. When she sees him satisfying himself, she instantly feels an inexplicable humiliation. This lifeless, stagnant imprisonment almost drains every last bit of hope from Katherine's heart. And yet fate seems to open a narrow crack for her. The life that has left her unable to breathe finally welcomes spring, because a collapse has occurred at the family mine. Her husband has to leave overnight to handle the trouble, and her father-in-law also has to go to London to calm the situation. With that, Katherine's mood instantly brightens. This means she will temporarily become the queen of the house. The soul once imprisoned in a cage is finally released. Katherine tries to seize this fleeting time, letting the freedom she has missed for so long nourish her dried-up soul. She releases her long-suppressed sadness across the empty fields. One day, Katherine is resting on the sofa when she is awakened by noise outside the window. She slowly gets up and follows the sound to the stables. She finds a group of crude men gathered together. Their powerless excuse displeases her, but one unruly groom says this:
"We're weighing a pig. Mom, weighing a sow to be precise."
A sow.
As you see.
Only then does Katherine learn that her maid has been stripped naked and suspended in the air by them. Then Katherine, slightly angered, immediately exercises the authority of the lady of the estate. She orders all the men to face the wall and shut their mouths. The maid, once lowered down, flees the scene in panic, and at this moment, Katherine turns her gaze toward the groom named Sebastian. After living under suffocating pressure for so long, she seems to smell fresh air for the first time. As if possessed, she says a line full of temptation.
How much would I weigh?
Would you like me to check?
Sebastian slowly walks toward Katherine and catches her in his arms when she is not prepared. In panic, Katherine fights back wildly, and finally pushes him away after struggling with all her strength. Still a little nervous, she forces herself to stay calm and scolds everyone.
You have wasted quite enough of my husband's good time and good money. I shall be keeping an eye on you, gentlemen.
Sebastian's behavior disturbs Katherine's heart. That strong hormonal presence bursts open in an instant. That night, her mind is full of thoughts, and Sebastian's figure keeps appearing in her head. Her excited heart is beyond words, like a fire igniting a blazing desire inside her. The next day, just before a storm is about to arrive, Katherine walks alone across the open fields of the estate. She deliberately lets Sebastian see her wandering there. No matter how he shouts, she ignores him with a teasing attitude. That night, Katherine is warming herself by the fireplace when she suddenly hears a strange sound outside the door. After hesitating for a moment, she gets up to check, but she never expects the visitor to be the unruly groom, Sebastian. Katherine tries to keep him outside the door, but Sebastian's body is too strong, and after entering the room, he presses her directly against the wall. Although Katherine instinctively resists with all her strength, she still half resists and half surrenders to her physical desire. In the morning, the maid comes to the room as usual. She suddenly finds Katherine's nightgown thrown on the floor, while Katherine herself is naked and sleeping soundly. Sensing that something is wrong, the maid quietly slips away, leaving Katherine, full of laughter and joy, lying on the bed. Not long after, the town priest suddenly comes to visit. His words all hint that Katherine should behave herself. At this moment, Katherine hears from him that all of this has been twisted by the maid's gossip. Not only that, while picking mushrooms, the maid also indirectly warns Sebastian not to go too far. If the master returns, they will all be in trouble. But Katherine, whose desire has been ignited by Sebastian, begins to let herself go more and more recklessly. Before it is even dark, she pulls Sebastian into her room. By chance, the maid sees the unspeakable scene through the keyhole, but good times do not last long, because the return of her father-in-law shatters her dream. Katherine once again puts on that blue gown and sits properly on the sofa. She returns to being a delicate vase, but what she does not know is that her father-in-law already knows everything about her absurd behavior these past few days. He storms straight into the stables and beats the unprepared Sebastian until his body is covered in wounds. Then he orders someone to lock Sebastian inside the storehouse. When Katherine hears the news, she becomes frantic with worry and recklessly begs her father-in-law to spare Sebastian from danger. Unexpectedly, she is met with his merciless scolding instead. He calls her an unfaithful wife and even says she has failed to produce an heir for the family.
Where is your son? Where is he? He has made that impossible. Let him out.
This slap completely begins Katherine's transformation into something monstrous. Forced into a corner, she leaves her room early the next morning in order to save Sebastian. Then she stands quietly before her father-in-law, waiting to be scolded. The stubborn Katherine once again infuriates him. Her father-in-law becomes so angry and embarrassed that he smashes a cup. Then he carries his tray into the bedroom, and at this moment, Katherine, as if she has planned everything, calmly lifts a chair and wedges it against the bedroom door handle. Then she sits calmly at the dining table and begins casually chatting with the maid beside her. After a moment, the old man's cries for help come from inside the bedroom. The maid wants to open the door, but Katherine stops her coldly. Only when the knocking grows weaker and weaker does Katherine calmly tell her to call the doctor. After learning that her father-in-law died from poisoning after eating poisonous mushrooms, the maid instantly breaks down, although no one blames her for it. From then on, the maid somehow becomes mute. After that, Katherine immediately finds Sebastian, who has been locked away. Heartbroken, she uses her saliva to lick the wounds of her lover, because Katherine's husband was forced into this marriage by his father. He hates her deeply. He does not even attend his father's funeral. From then on, the two of them become even more reckless together. They are sweet together like a married couple. Katherine expresses her love at every moment.
I'd rather stop you breathing than have you doubt how I feel.
Faced with such a controlling woman, Sebastian feels somewhat uncomfortable. Late at night, after their passion, the two are sleeping, but Katherine is suddenly awakened by the sound of hooves. When she opens the window and looks outside, she discovers her husband's horse. Terrified, she immediately puts on her nightgown and wakes the sleeping Sebastian. She hides the shaken Sebastian inside the wardrobe, then pretends nothing has happened and sits on the bed to wait. Right after that, her husband walks in. He questions Katherine with a trace of suspicion, but she covers everything with clever lies, until he picks up a belt from the floor, exposing Katherine's hidden secret. No matter how she explains, she cannot hide the fact that she has been unfaithful.
You will alter your behavior, madam.
And how will I alter my behaviour, sir?
You will never see that man again. He will be sent from this house.
When Katherine hears that her lover will be sent away, she becomes completely furious. Perhaps blinded by love, she directly pulls Sebastian, who is hiding by the side door, into the room, right in front of her husband. She puts on a passionate display, The unbearable scene makes her husband explode with rage. He immediately attacks Sebastian, and the two begin fighting, but Sebastian is still a servant after all, and he does not dare use his full strength. Sebastian is pinned hard against the wall by Katherine's husband, but at this moment, Katherine strikes her husband down with an iron poker. Then she keeps releasing all the emotions that have been suppressed inside her heart, to keep the others on the estate from noticing. Before dawn arrives, the two take the body and the horse into the woods to destroy the evidence. In the end, they use any means necessary to be together. The next day, Sebastian is still shaken and dazed, drained and listless. He leans in Katherine's arms. The enormous pressure leaves him unable to sleep. However, under Katherine's constant comfort, Sebastian gradually crosses the psychological barrier. The two begin living together with complete recklessness. Sebastian even puts on fine clothes and has breakfast with Katherine. This scene leaves the maid beside them in disbelief. In this remote estate, Katherine no longer needs to fear the authority of her husband or father-in-law. She seems to be the empress of this castle, ruling over everything. But good times do not last long, because a woman arrives here with a child. She says Teddy is the illegitimate son of Katherine's husband. She also says she has an agreement in her possession. If Teddy's father dies, everything in the estate will belong to Teddy. At this moment, Katherine suddenly understands. The reason her husband refused to touch her was that he had fallen in love with a black woman. Hearing this, Katherine can only lie and say that her husband is not dead, only temporarily missing. The kind old woman believes her and stays here with the child. Teddy likes Katherine very much, following her around every day and staying by her side. But all of this deeply troubles Sebastian, who has returned to the stables. To make Katherine notice him again, Sebastian decides to get close to the maid. Before long, Katherine discovers that her lower belly is slightly swelling. She never imagined that she is already pregnant, but at this very moment, she discovers Sebastian walking together with the maid. Consumed by jealousy, she follows them. Unexpectedly, Teddy blocks her way. In her anxiety, she angrily scolds him, but Teddy, running into the distance, does not pay attention. Just as Katherine is troubled by her current dilemma, she hears news that makes her heart tighten. Someone says Teddy has gone missing in the forest. Then she mobilizes everyone on the estate to begin searching. Only after night falls does Sebastian finally find Teddy by the waterfall. At that moment, he once has a chance to get rid of him, but naturally cowardly, he chooses to bring the freezing Teddy back to the estate instead. He anxiously orders the servants to bring blankets.
How dare you walk into this house and give orders? Get out!
I saved him.
Get out!
Humiliated, Sebastian packs his things and prepares to leave. He can no longer endure such a shameful situation. He tells Katherine that when he found Teddy, the boy was sitting at the edge of the waterfall. If he had been a little more ruthless, he could have made Teddy disappear forever, but the kindness at the bottom of his heart still made him give up. And yet those very words awaken something in the pregnant Katherine. A terrifying idea immediately grows in her heart. In the dim room, Katherine picks up a pillow and, together with Sebastian, smothers the still young Teddy to death. Afterward, she sits expressionless in the chair, looking at the child's cold body. For the first time, she sheds tears under the torment of her conscience. Soon, news of Teddy's death reaches the inspector. After the doctor's examination, they discover injuries on the body. This also proves that the child did not die naturally. But at the time, only Katherine and Teddy were together, although she claims she had fallen asleep. Using that as a cover, the scratches on the child's legs allow the doctor to determine that this was murder. Just as everyone is arguing endlessly, Sebastian suddenly bursts in, tormented by the intense guilt inside him. He cannot forgive himself. He says Katherine's love is suffocating him.
Kill that boy. She killed that boy so that we could be together. I thought I loved her. She suffocated me and she hounded me.
Katherine looks at the lover who has betrayed her, utterly hopeless. She feels as if she has fallen into an endless abyss, unable to escape. Then, under everyone's gaze, Katherine calmly pins everything on Sebastian and the maid. She claims they poisoned her father-in-law with poisonous mushrooms to take revenge for the beating they suffered. She also calls on the mute maid to confront them. Under Katherine's eloquent disguise, even the old woman sympathetically stands on her side. In the end, the maid who cannot speak takes the blame for everything. She and Sebastian are sent to the execution ground together. Finally, Katherine becomes the owner of the estate, and the child in her belly will become the heir. When she placed all her hopes in love, she chose to sacrifice everything for it. But when love betrayed her, Katherine became completely monstrous. She turned blind love into a sacrifice.